The first radio transmission came at 3:47 hours, crackling through the static of Denver Center's control room like a ghost from another dimension. Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. United 7742 Heavy, experiencing dual engine failure at flight level 370. We have medical emergency in cockpit. Requesting immediate vectors to nearest suitable airport. The voice was young, impossibly young, with the kind of steady precision that shouldn't exist in an 18-year-old throat. Controller Marcus Rivera had been working the graveyard shift for 12 years, had heard every kind of emergency transmission imaginable, but something about this one made his blood freeze in his veins. The Boeing 777-300ER had departed Los Angeles International 3 hours earlier, bound for London Heathrow with 211 souls aboard. Now it was bleeding altitude over the Colorado Rockies, engines windmilling uselessly in the thin mountain air, and the person on the radio wasn't Captain Thompson or First Officer Martinez. According to the passenger manifest, it was someone named Delilah Phoenix Reese, listed simply as passenger, row 23F. What the manifest didn't show was that Phoenix had been the youngest pilot ever to graduate from the Air Force Academy, the first woman to fly combat missions in the F-22 Raptor, and the only pilot in modern military history to successfully deadstick a $50 million fighter jet onto a carrier deck in hurricane-force winds. United 7742, Denver Center, roger your Mayday. Squawk 7700 and say souls on board. Rivera's hands moved automatically across his console, but his mind was racing. The aircraft's transponder showed it descending through 32,000 feet, still 17 minutes out from Colorado Springs. At its current rate of descent, basic mathematics painted a grim picture. Denver Center, United 7742 Heavy, 211 souls on board, fuel remaining approximately 45 minutes, both pilots unconscious, suspected carbon monoxide poisoning. I have control of the aircraft. The transmission was clinical, professional, but Rivera caught something else beneath the surface. A tremor so faint it might have been atmospheric interference, except he knew better. He'd heard that same barely controlled terror in the voices of combat veterans, the sound of someone staring into the abyss while maintaining perfect radio discipline. Across the darkened control room, Supervisor Janet Walsh was already on the phone with Air Traffic Control Command Center, her voice low and urgent. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Denver's city lights stretched toward the horizon like a constellation fallen to Earth, beautiful and utterly indifferent to the drama unfolding 30,000 feet above. In 14 minutes, Phoenix Reese would either save 211 lives or become another statistic in aviation history. The mountain peaks below waited in silent judgment. Phoenix adjusted her grip on the yoke, feeling the massive aircraft respond to her touch like a wounded bird trying to remember how to fly. The captain slumped forward against his restraints, his breathing shallow but steady. First Officer Martinez was unconscious but stable in the right seat. The flight attendants had done their job well, sealing off the cockpit and implementing emergency oxygen procedures throughout the cabin. Now it was up to her, an 18-year-old girl who hadn't touched civilian aircraft controls since her private pilot training 6 years ago. The 777's cockpit was a maze of digital displays and analog gauges, nothing like the sleek fighter jets she'd grown accustomed to. But aircraft were aircraft, and the fundamental laws of physics didn't care about your age or gender. She keyed the radio again, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding her. Denver Center, United 7742. I need vectors to the longest available runway. This bird's getting heavy, and I've got a lot of people counting on me getting this right the first time. Rivera's response crackled back immediately. United 7742, fly heading 180, descend and maintain flight level 280. Denver International is 43 miles southeast, runway 16R available, 16,000 feet. Phoenix, I've got your service record pulled up. Colonel Martinez spoke highly of your emergency landing capabilities. A ghost of a smile crossed Phoenix's face at the mention of her former commanding officer. Colonel Martinez had been the one to give her the call sign Phoenix after she'd walked away from that carrier landing, emerging from the wreckage with nothing more than a mild concussion and a reputation that would follow her for the rest of her military career. Copy Denver Center. Thank you for the confidence. United 7742 out. Behind her, a flight attendant named Maria Santos appeared in the cockpit doorway, her face pale but determined. Miss, I've got medical training. The passengers are asking questions and I need to know, are we going to make it? Phoenix didn't answer immediately, instead focusing on the engine failure checklist she'd pulled up on the primary flight display. The 777 systems were automated to a degree that would have been science fiction just 20 years ago, but automation couldn't land a plane with no engine power. We're going to make it, Phoenix said finally, her words carrying the weight of absolute conviction. Tell them we've got the situation under control, and I need everyone to follow standard emergency landing procedures when we begin our approach. Maria nodded and disappeared back into the cabin, where 209 passengers waited in varying states of anxiety and prayer. Phoenix keyed her radio once more, this time switching to the emergency frequency. Any station, United 7742 Heavy declaring emergency. I have a disabled aircraft with no engine power, attempting emergency landing at Denver International. Request emergency vehicles standing by, runway 16R. The response came immediately from Denver Tower. United 7742, Tower, emergency equipment is rolling. You are cleared for emergency approach runway 16R, winds light and variable. Phoenix, we're all pulling for you. The mountain peaks were clearly visible now in the pre-dawn darkness, their snow-covered summits glowing ethereally in the moonlight. Phoenix had always found something profoundly beautiful about flying at night, the way the earth looked like a vast ocean of stars viewed from above. Tonight, that beauty felt different, sharper, more precious, as if she were seeing it for the last time. She pushed the thought away and focused on her instruments, calculating glide ratio and approach speed with the kind of mathematical precision that had made her legendary among her Air Force colleagues. At 26,000 feet, she began configuring the aircraft for landing, extending flaps and lowering landing gear despite the additional drag it would create. The 777 responded sluggishly, its controls heavy without engine-driven hydraulics. Every input had to be deliberate, calculated, perfect. There would be no second chances, no go-around option, no opportunity to correct a mistake. This was the kind of flying that separated professionals from amateurs, and Phoenix had been a professional since her first solo flight at age 16. The radio crackled again, this time with a familiar voice that made her heart skip a beat. Phoenix, this is Hawkeye. I'm currently airborne in an F-16 about 20 miles southwest of your position. Thought you might like some company for the final approach. Major Jessica Hawkeye Winters had been Phoenix's wingman during her deployment to the Middle East, and hearing her voice now was like receiving a message from Guardian Angel. Hawkeye Phoenix. Roger that. Good to hear a friendly voice. What's your assessment of the situation? I've got you visual, Phoenix. You're maintaining good control authority, but your descent rate is steeper than ideal. Recommend increasing airspeed to extend your glide range. Hawkeye's F-16 appeared off Phoenix's left wing, its navigation lights blinking steadily in the darkness. Having another pilot nearby, especially one she trusted implicitly, helped calm the subtle tremor of anxiety that had been building in her chest since taking control of the aircraft. Copy Hawkeye. Increasing airspeed to best glide. Phoenix nudged the yoke forward slightly, watching her vertical speed indicator respond accordingly. The 777 was designed to glide approximately 3 miles for every 1,000 feet of altitude, which meant she should theoretically be able to reach Denver International with altitude to spare. But theory and reality rarely aligned perfectly in aviation, especially during emergency situations. Behind her, she could hear the quiet murmur of passenger conversations, punctuated by the occasional crying child or nervous laughter. These people had boarded a routine international flight, expecting nothing more than mediocre airline food and cramped seating. Instead, they found themselves passengers on what would either become a testament to human resilience or a tragedy that would be studied in aviation safety courses for decades to come. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on Phoenix's shoulder like a physical force. Denver Center's voice filled the cockpit again, calm and professional despite the extraordinary circumstances. United 7742, be advised we have emergency equipment in position. Runway 16R is closed to all other traffic, and you are cleared to land when ready. Phoenix, we're showing you at flight level 220, approximately 28 miles from touchdown. Phoenix acknowledged the transmission and began her mental preparation for what would undoubtedly be the most challenging landing of her career. She thought about her training, all those hours in simulators and actual aircraft, learning to handle every conceivable emergency scenario. Her instructors had been tough, demanding perfection not out of cruelty, but out of recognition that aviation forgave no mistakes. Chair flying, they'd called it, mentally rehearsing procedures until they became second nature, muscle memory that could function even when conscious thought failed. Now, 30,000 feet above Colorado, that training would either save 211 lives or prove insufficient to overcome the laws of physics. The aircraft's attitude indicator showed a gentle descent, nose down approximately 3 degrees. Phoenix made subtle corrections to maintain optimal glide speed while conserving what little altitude remained. Every foot of height was precious now, convertible to forward momentum that might mean the difference between reaching the runway and falling short into the suburban neighborhoods surrounding Denver International. Mathematics, physics, and fate would determine the outcome, but skill and determination still had roles to play. Hawkeye's voice crackled through the radio again, steady and reassuring. "Phoenix, you're looking good from here. Maintaining centerline, descent rate nominal. Remember your carrier training. This is just a really big deck with better approach lighting." The reference to their shared military background brought a brief smile to Phoenix's face. Carrier landings were exercises in controlled violence, requiring pilots to essentially crash their aircraft onto a moving postage stamp in the middle of the ocean. By comparison, Denver International's 16,000-foot runway was practically infinite. Copy Hawkeye. Though I have to say, this thing handles like a flying apartment building compared to what we're used to. Phoenix's response carried the first hint of levity she'd allowed herself since taking control of the aircraft. Humor was a defense mechanism among pilots, a way of processing stress and maintaining psychological equilibrium during crisis situations. Her ability to joke, even briefly, suggested she was managing the situation well mentally, a crucial factor in successful emergency flying. At 18,000 feet, Phoenix began her final approach preparations. She reviewed emergency landing procedures, mentally rehearsing every step from touchdown to evacuation. The 777's emergency slides would deploy automatically upon landing, creating escape routes for passengers. Flight attendants were already positioning themselves throughout the cabin, preparing to manage what would likely be a challenging evacuation process. Everything depended on her ability to deliver the aircraft to the runway in a condition that would allow those procedures to function as designed. Denver Tower's transmission cut through her concentration. "United 7742, you are number 1 for landing, runway 16R wind calm, visibility unlimited, emergency equipment standing by. Phoenix, you've got this." The controller's use of her call sign rather than the flight number was a subtle acknowledgement of the personal nature of what she was attempting. This wasn't just United Flight 7742 anymore. It was Phoenix's airplane, Phoenix's responsibility, Phoenix's moment to prove that gender and age were irrelevant when measured against skill and determination. Through the cockpit windows, she could see the glow of Denver's city lights spreading across the horizon like a luminous carpet. Somewhere below, families were sleeping peacefully in their beds, unaware that an 18-year-old girl was fighting to save 211 lives in the darkness above them. The contrast between the ordinary world below and the extraordinary drama unfolding at flight level 180 struck Phoenix as profoundly surreal. She keyed her radio one final time before beginning the approach phase. Denver Tower, United 7742 Heavy, beginning emergency approach runway 16R, request emergency equipment remain clear of runway environment until after touchdown and rollout complete. Professional protocol demanded she maintain radio discipline even now, ensuring that rescue personnel wouldn't interfere with her landing attempt by positioning themselves too close to the runway surface. The response came immediately. United 7742, Roger. Emergency equipment will remain in position until aircraft comes to complete stop. Phoenix, bring her home. Those 4 words, bring her, the weight of collective hope from everyone involved in the emergency response. Air traffic controllers, emergency responders, and military personnel were all united in their desire to see Phoenix succeed, to witness the kind of miraculous landing that becomes legend within aviation communities. At 15,000 feet, with Denver International's runway lights finally visible as a thin line of illumination on the horizon, Phoenix allowed herself one moment of honest reflection. 18 years old, she thought. 18 years old, and responsible for more lives than some military commanders ever held in their hands. The irony wasn't lost on her. She joined the Air Force to serve her country, never imagining that her most significant service would come aboard a civilian aircraft over Colorado's mountains. The 777 continued its steady descent through the thin mountain air, every system functioning perfectly despite the complete loss of engine power. Modern aircraft were marvels of engineering redundancy, designed to remain controllable even under catastrophic failure conditions. But engineering could only provide the tools. Human skill and judgment remained irreplaceable factors in aviation safety. Tonight, Phoenix represented the human element in its purest form. Training, experience, and raw courage, confronting the indifferent forces of physics and circumstance. Hawkeye's F-16 maintained formation off her left wing, a constant reminder that she wasn't facing this challenge alone. Military pilots formed bonds that transcended normal friendship, forged through shared danger and mutual dependence. Having her former wingman nearby provided psychological support that couldn't be quantified but was nonetheless real and valuable. Some battles were fought individually, but they were never fought in true isolation. At 12,000 feet, Phoenix began her final descent calculations. The mathematics were unforgiving. Current altitude, distance to runway, optimal glide speed, rate of descent, variables that would determine whether she reached Denver International with sufficient energy to execute a successful landing, or fell short in a suburban neighborhood where emergency response would be exponentially more complex. She'd practiced similar calculations thousands of times in training scenarios, but never with 211 lives hanging in the balance. The radio crackled with Denver Tower's voice. United 7742, runway 16R in sight, 12 miles. You are cleared to land when ready. All emergency services are in position and standing by. Phoenix acknowledged the transmission while making final adjustments to her approach configuration. The 777's flaps were extended to landing position, landing gear down and locked, cabin prepared for emergency evacuation. Every system that could be prepared had been prepared. She thought about the passengers behind her, business travelers, families on vacation, students returning from abroad. Each person represented a collection of relationships, responsibilities, dreams, and fears. They'd placed their trust in the airline, the aircraft, and ultimately in her ability to deliver them safely to the ground. That trust was both humbling and motivating, a responsibility that transcended personal fear or doubt. The mountain peaks were clearly visible now, their snow-covered summits glowing in the pre-dawn light like ancient sentinels watching over the unfolding drama. Phoenix had always found mountains to be profoundly beautiful and slightly ominous, magnificent in their permanence, indifferent to human struggles playing out in the thin air above them. Tonight, they served as silent witnesses to what would either be remembered as a triumph of human skill over circumstance, or a tragedy that no amount of preparation could have prevented. At 10,000 feet, the runway lights of Denver International became clearly defined individual points of illumination, rather than a distant glow on the horizon. Phoenix could see the emergency vehicles positioned along the runway's edge, their red and blue lights creating a colorful display that would have been festive under different circumstances. Those vehicles represented hope and preparation, the collective effort of professionals who specialized in managing aviation emergencies. United 7742, 8 miles from touchdown. You are looking very good from our perspective. Maintain current heading and descent rate. Denver Tower's voice carried genuine encouragement now, recognition that Phoenix was executing a textbook emergency approach despite impossible circumstances. Air traffic controllers witnessed hundreds of landings daily, but they would remember this approach for the rest of their careers. Phoenix keyed her radio. Tower, United 7742, 8 miles out, emergency approach. I need confirmation that runway is clear of all traffic and obstacles. The response came immediately. United 7742, runway 16R is clear, repeat clear. You have priority handling, no other traffic within 10 miles of your position. Professional protocol demanded these confirmations, even in emergency situations. Aviation safety was built on redundant communications, ensuring that critical information was transmitted, received, and understood correctly. Behind her, she could hear flight attendant Maria Santos making the final passenger announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, we are approaching Denver International Airport for our emergency landing. Please ensure your seat backs are upright, tray tables stowed, and seat belts securely fastened. When we come to a complete stop, please follow crew instructions for emergency evacuation. Remain calm and assist others as needed. The announcement was delivered with professional composure that concealed any personal anxiety Maria might have been feeling. At 8,000 feet, Phoenix could see individual buildings around the airport, the geometric patterns of suburban development spreading across the Colorado landscape like a vast urban circuit board. Each house, each street, each business represented normal life continuing unaware of the drama unfolding overhead. The contrast between ordinary existence and extraordinary crisis struck her as almost surreal, a reminder that most of life's significant moments occur unnoticed by the broader world. Hawkeye's voice filled the cockpit. Phoenix, you're maintaining perfect glide path. Rate of descent is spot on for your current configuration. You've got this handled like a professional. The encouragement from her former wingman carried special weight, coming from someone who understood both the technical and psychological challenges of emergency flying. Military pilots developed an intuitive sense for when their colleagues were performing well under pressure, and Hawkeye's confidence was both genuine and reassuring. The 777's instruments showed all systems functioning normally despite the complete loss of engine power. Modern aircraft were designed to remain flyable under single-engine conditions, and while total engine failure was exponentially more challenging, the basic principles remained the same. Maintain airspeed, control attitude, navigate precisely, and execute proper landing procedures. Phoenix had trained for similar scenarios in simulators, though never in an aircraft this large or with so many lives at stake. At 6,000 feet, she could clearly see the airport's layout. Multiple runways arranged in parallel terminal buildings connected by a complex network of taxiways, aircraft parked at gates like sleeping metal birds waiting for dawn. Denver International was one of America's busiest airports, but tonight it belonged entirely to her. Every controller, every emergency responder, every support person focused on facilitating her safe arrival. United 7742, 5 miles out, cleared to land runway 16R Phoenix. We're all pulling for you down here. The controller's voice carried emotion now, recognition that they were witnessing something special, not just an emergency landing, but a demonstration of human capability under extreme pressure. These moments defined careers and created legends that would be told in air traffic control facilities for generations. Phoenix made her final approach adjustments, trimming the aircraft for optimal glide performance while monitoring her rate of descent and forward airspeed. The mathematics of unpowered flight were unforgiving: too fast, and she'd consume runway length unnecessarily; too slow, and she'd risk stalling before reaching the touchdown zone. Every input had to be precise, calculated, perfect. The runway threshold was clearly visible now, marked by approach lights that created a luminous pathway through the darkness. Phoenix had made thousands of landings in her military career, but none had carried such weight or demanded such precision. This approach would be judged not just by professional standards, but by its outcome. Success would save 211 lives. Failure would create a tragedy that would resonate through aviation history. At 4,000 feet above ground level, Phoenix began her final mental preparation for touchdown. She reviewed emergency procedures, evacuation protocols, and post-landing responsibilities. Once the aircraft stopped rolling, her job would shift from pilot to coordinator, ensuring that passengers and crew evacuated safely and efficiently. But first, she had to deliver the 777 to the runway surface in a condition that would allow those procedures to function. The Colorado landscape spread below her like a three-dimensional map, every detail clearly visible in the crisp mountain air. Streets, houses, parking lots, and commercial buildings created geometric patterns that seemed almost artificial in their regularity. This was human civilization viewed from above, organized, purposeful, vulnerable to the whims of physics and circumstance that governed aviation emergencies. United 7742, 3 miles out, you are looking perfect. Rate of descent and airspeed are exactly where they need to be. Denver Tower's encouragement carried technical authority. Controllers monitored approach parameters continuously, using radar and visual observation to assess aircraft performance. Their confirmation that she was maintaining proper approach geometry provided objective validation of her piloting skills. Phoenix allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. 3 miles from touchdown, with approach parameters stable and aircraft systems functioning normally, she was positioned to execute a successful emergency landing. The hardest part, maintaining control during the initial emergency and navigating to the airport, was behind her. Now she needed to focus on the landing itself, the moment when theoretical flying would become practical contact with Earth. Behind her, the cabin had grown quiet except for the steady hum of ventilation systems and the occasional murmur of passenger conversation. 209 people were depending on her ability to translate 18 years of life experience, 6 years of flying expertise, and countless hours of training into a successful landing. The responsibility was overwhelming if she allowed herself to think about it directly, so she focused instead on the technical aspects of what she was attempting. At 2,000 feet above ground level, Phoenix could see individual people near the airport terminal, tiny figures going about their early morning routines, unaware that they were witnessing one of aviation's most challenging emergency scenarios. Airport workers, passengers waiting for connecting flights, airline personnel, all part of the vast network of human activity that kept commercial aviation functioning 24 hours a day. Phoenix, this is Hawkeye. I'm going to maintain formation through touchdown, then break left to give emergency equipment clear access to the runway. You're flying this approach like you've been doing it your whole life. Her wingman's words carried the weight of professional respect earned through shared military experience. In aviation, competence was the ultimate currency, and Hawkeye's confidence reflected her assessment of Phoenix's performance under pressure. The 777's cockpit was filled with the steady electronic tones and visual displays that characterized modern aircraft systems. Unlike the fighter jets Phoenix was accustomed to, commercial aircraft provided vast amounts of information through digital interfaces designed to support decision-making rather than demand split-second reactions. She'd learned to interpret these systems quickly during her emergency checklist procedures, but the fundamental skills of flying remained unchanged regardless of aircraft type. At 1,000 feet above ground level, Phoenix began her final approach phase. The runway was clearly defined now, a precise geometric shape surrounded by approach lighting systems designed to guide aircraft safely to touchdown. Every light, every marking, every navigational aid had been carefully positioned to support exactly this kind of precision approach. Human engineering was about to be tested by human skill under circumstances no engineer could have fully anticipated. United 7742, 1 mile final, cleared to land runway 16R. Emergency equipment is standing by. The controller's voice was calm and professional, but Phoenix detected the underlying tension that accompanied every emergency landing. Controllers witnessed these scenarios regularly in training scenarios, but actual emergencies were rare enough to create anxiety even among experienced personnel. She could see people gathered in the airport terminal now, faces pressed against windows to watch the approaching aircraft. Word had undoubtedly spread about the emergency landing attempt, creating the kind of public drama that aviation professionals preferred to avoid. But public attention was irrelevant to the physics of unpowered flight. The 777 would respond to her inputs based on aerodynamic principles that cared nothing about spectators or media coverage. Phoenix keyed her radio for what might be the final time. Tower, United 7742 on short final. Runway 16R, thank you for your assistance throughout this emergency. Phoenix out. Professional protocol demanded proper radio discipline even in the final moments before touchdown, but her words also carried personal gratitude for the support she'd received from air traffic control personnel who had managed the emergency with exceptional skill and dedication. The runway threshold passed beneath the aircraft's nose, and Phoenix began her landing flare, pulling back gently on the yoke to reduce the rate of descent and prepare for touchdown. This was the moment when flying became landing, when controlled flight transitioned to controlled ground contact. Every pilot knew that good landings began with good approaches, and her approach had been textbook perfect despite impossible circumstances. The main landing gear touched down with a firm but controlled impact, exactly as Phoenix had planned. The 777 settled onto the runway surface with the characteristic bounce and roll of a successful landing, its weight transferring from wings to wheels in the fundamental transition that marked the end of every flight. Phoenix maintained directional control with rudder inputs while applying maximum braking, using every foot of available runway to bring the massive aircraft to a complete stop. United 7742 is down and safe. Runway 16R, she transmitted, her voice carrying the first hint of emotion since taking control of the aircraft. Behind her, she could hear passengers applauding, a sound that brought unexpected tears to her eyes. They were alive, all of them, because training and skill had overcome impossible circumstances through sheer determination and precise execution. Emergency vehicles raced toward the aircraft from their staging positions, red and blue lights creating a colorful display across the airport surface. Phoenix completed her shutdown procedures, while flight attendant Maria Santos initiated evacuation protocols, opening emergency exits and deploying evacuation slides. The organized chaos of emergency response was beginning, but the most dangerous phase of the crisis had ended successfully. Hawkeye's F-16 performed a ceremonial flyby at low altitude, rocking its wings in the traditional military salute reserved for exceptional achievements. The gesture brought a smile to Phoenix's face as she watched her former wingman disappear into the dawn sky. Some achievements transcended individual recognition. They belonged to the broader community of aviation professionals who shared both the risks and rewards of flight. Denver Tower's final transmission filled the cockpit. United 7742, outstanding job. Phoenix, that was one of the finest examples of emergency flying we've ever witnessed. Welcome to Denver. The controller's words carried genuine admiration, recognition that they had all participated in something special, not just an emergency response, but a demonstration of human capability under extreme pressure. As emergency responders surrounded the aircraft and passengers began evacuating down the slides, Phoenix remained in the cockpit completing post-flight procedures. She was no longer the 18-year-old girl who had boarded the flight in Los Angeles. She was Phoenix, the pilot who had saved 211 lives through skill, training, and determination. The transformation was complete, and legends were beginning to take shape. 24 hours later, Phoenix sat in the quiet corner of Denver International's passenger terminal, watching commercial flights take off and land with the routine efficiency that defined modern aviation. The media attention had been overwhelming. Interviews, photo sessions, official commendations from military and civilian authorities. Everyone wanted to understand how an 18-year-old girl had accomplished what seasoned pilots might have found impossible. But Phoenix knew the answer wasn't mysterious or miraculous. It was training, preparation, and the accumulated wisdom of thousands of pilots who had faced similar challenges throughout aviation history. She'd simply been in the right place with the right skills at the moment when both were desperately needed. The real miracle was the system of education, training, and professional development that had prepared her for exactly this situation. Colonel Martinez appeared beside her chair, his familiar presence immediately recognizable even before she looked up from her coffee. Her former commanding officer had flown to Denver as soon as news of the emergency landing reached military channels, driven by professional pride and personal concern for his former student. "Phoenix," he said, settling into the adjacent chair. "I've been in aviation for 30 years, and I've never seen anything quite like what you accomplished yesterday." She looked up at him with tired eyes that held new depth of experience. "It was just flying, sir. Everything we trained for, everything you taught me about emergency procedures. The airplane did most of the work. I just had to keep it pointed in the right direction." Her words reflected the humility that characterized professional pilots, recognition that individual skill operated within larger systems of technology and training. "That's exactly what makes it remarkable," Martinez replied. "When everything goes wrong, when systems fail and circumstances become impossible, the difference between tragedy and miracle comes down to the person in the left seat. Yesterday, you were that person, and 211 families are going home because of decisions you made under pressure that would have overwhelmed most pilots twice your age." Phoenix considered his words while watching a United 777 taxi toward the gate, its powerful engines creating heat shimmer in the Colorado sunshine. That aircraft was identical to the one she'd landed 24 hours earlier, but it represented routine operation rather than emergency crisis. The contrast illustrated aviation's fundamental paradox: extraordinary safety built on the foundation of preparing for extraordinary failures. "The passengers keep thanking me," she said finally, "but I keep thinking about all the people who made it possible. Air traffic control, the aircraft designers, the maintenance crews who kept the systems running, the instructors who taught me to fly. Nobody accomplishes something like this alone." Her perspective reflected the military training that emphasized teamwork and mutual dependence over individual achievement. Martinez nodded approvingly. "That's the mark of a true professional, recognizing that individual excellence operates within larger systems of collective competence. But don't minimize your own contribution. Training provides tools, but using those tools under pressure requires something that can't be taught directly. You demonstrated that yesterday." A news crew was setting up equipment nearby, preparing for another interview session. Phoenix had become a media phenomenon overnight. The 18-year-old girl who saved 211 lives had captured public imagination in ways that transcended aviation circles. Television networks, newspapers, and internet platforms were all competing for access to her story, turning a professional emergency response into popular entertainment. "How do you handle all this attention?" Martinez asked, gesturing toward the media preparation. "Fame isn't something we prepare pilots for, especially fame that comes from emergency situations." His question reflected genuine concern for her psychological well-being in the aftermath of unprecedented public scrutiny. Phoenix smiled for the first time since the landing. "I keep reminding myself that the attention isn't really about me. It's about what happened. People want to believe that ordinary individuals can do extraordinary things when circumstances demand it. Maybe that's important for them to believe, and if my experience helps them maintain that faith, then the attention serves a purpose beyond personal recognition." Her response demonstrated the mature perspective that had enabled her to handle the emergency landing itself. She understood that public attention was a byproduct of her actions rather than their primary purpose, and she was willing to accept media responsibilities as part of her broader service to the aviation community and society in general. "I've been thinking about your future," Martinez said, shifting the conversation toward practical considerations. "The Air Force is interested in having you return to active duty, obviously. But there are also opportunities in commercial aviation, test flying, even aerospace engineering if you wanted to pursue advanced education. Yesterday opened doors that might not have been available otherwise." Phoenix considered the possibilities while watching ground cruise service aircraft on the tarmac beyond the terminal windows. Her emergency landing had indeed created opportunities, but it had also clarified her understanding of what she wanted from her career. "I want to keep flying," she said finally, "but I also want to teach other pilots how to handle situations like yesterday. Training saved those lives, and if I can contribute to training the next generation of pilots, maybe I can prevent tragedies before they occur." The answer revealed her instinct for service over personal advancement. Rather than leveraging her fame for individual benefit, she was thinking about how her experience could serve the broader aviation community. This perspective reflected the character traits that had enabled her to perform successfully under pressure: focus on mission rather than self, commitment to collective rather than individual success. "That's exactly the answer I hoped to hear," Martinez said with obvious satisfaction. "The Air Force Academy has been looking for someone to lead their emergency procedures training program, someone with recent, relevant experience who can bring real-world credibility to theoretical instruction. Interested?" His proposal represented the perfect intersection of Phoenix's skills, experience, and professional aspirations. She looked up from her coffee with the first genuine enthusiasm she'd shown since the landing. Teaching other pilots how to handle emergencies, using yesterday's experience to help prepare the next generation for situations they hopefully never encounter. "Yes, sir, that sounds exactly right." Her response carried conviction that had been missing from discussions about media attention and public recognition. As they talked, passengers continued moving through the terminal around them. Business travelers, families, students, tourists, all part of the vast network of human mobility that commercial aviation enabled. Most would never experience emergency situations, but all depended on the skills and dedication of pilots trained to handle any circumstance. Phoenix's story had become part of that tradition of professional competence under pressure. The news crew finished their setup and approached respectfully, their camera operator maintaining professional distance while the reporter prepared her questions. Phoenix had learned to manage media interactions with the same systematic approach she applied to flying: preparation, clear communication, focus on essential information rather than dramatic speculation. "One more interview," she said to Martinez, "then I'd like to visit the aircraft. I want to see it again, now that the emergency is over. Sometimes you don't fully appreciate what happened until you have time to reflect without pressure. Her desire to revisit the aircraft reflected the analytical mindset that characterized professional pilots, understanding not just what happened, but how and why. Martinez stood to leave, but paused before walking away. Phoenix, I want you to remember something. Yesterday wasn't just about saving lives, though that was obviously the most important outcome. You also demonstrated that competence and character matter more than age or gender or any other demographic characteristic. You earned the respect of every professional pilot who witnessed that landing. His words carried weight beyond personal encouragement. In aviation, respect was earned through demonstrated competence under pressure, and Phoenix had earned that respect through her actions rather than her background or circumstances. The 18-year-old girl who had boarded the flight in Lowe's Angels was gone forever, replaced by Phoenix, the pilot who had proven that skill and determination could overcome impossible circumstances. As the reporter approached with her questions and cameras, Phoenix prepared mentally for another round of public explanation. But this time, she was ready to discuss not just what had happened, but what it meant for the future of aviation training and emergency preparedness. Her story was becoming larger than individual achievement. It was becoming a case study in human performance under pressure that would influence pilot training for generations to come. The afternoon sun streamed through the terminal windows, creating patterns of light and shadow across the polished floor. Somewhere in the distance, aircraft engines spooled up for takeoff, carrying passengers toward destinations around the world with the routine efficiency that defined modern aviation. It was the sound of normalcy returning, of systems functioning as designed, of ordinary miracles that occurred thousands of times daily without recognition or celebration. But in the quiet corner where Phoenix waited for her interview, yesterday's extraordinary miracle continued to resonate, not just in the media attention or official recognition,